We are here. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Lopes Goes Last podcast. I, of course, am your host, Tyler Lopes. If you have not subscribed yet, please feel free to do so. Also, hit that bell icon so you never miss any one of my videos. Also, please like and share this video so we can help the podcast grow. And please follow me on Twitter at Lopes Goes Last and Facebook at Lopes Goes Last podcast. We just recently hit 20 subscribers as I checked earlier today and saw that. Thank you guys so very much for supporting the channel. And I know that, 20 subscribers doesn't sound like a lot, and it really isn't a lot in the grand scheme of things, considering there's, channels with 18 million subscribers, 25 million, whatever the case may be, So I understand that 20 is, whatever, right? And I understand that completely, but when you start out with 2 subscribers, 20 is just a wonderful, wonderful place to be. And I'm so very thankful for all of you guys for tuning in, for subscribing, for sharing, for liking the videos. I really appreciate it so very much. But certainly not satisfied with it at all in terms of just where I want to go and where I want to be. I want to hit 100 subscribers by the end of the year, and I think that we can do it. But the only way we can do it is if you guys share these videos, if you tell all your friends, tell all of your family, you guys put it out on social media, just like I do, and, that's the only way that this thing's going to grow. And I think we can do it, but we all have to work together. So if you have a minute and you haven't subscribed yet and you're watching this, please do so. It's just one click. It's completely free. It's nothing for any of you watching, but it means so much to me and so much to the channel so that it can grow. And yeah, again, just thank you guys so much for where we are with that. But a lot to get into. Don't want to waste any more of your guys' time. Just so much going on in the world right now in terms of sports. NHL playoffs is going on. The MLB season is in full swing. NBA playoffs and the NFL draft just concluded last weekend. And, man, it has been just a wild week, certainly. And, I'm recording this a little bit later in the week than I usually do. Usually I record on Mondays, maybe Sundays. Maybe at very rare occasions on Tuesday. But I am recording on Thursday, May 5th. So I am recording the day before you guys are going to see this. My schedule's been thrown way, way off. It's been an absolutely crazy week. But certainly I wanted to get this out there for you guys as quickly as I could because there is a lot to talk about. For those of you who watched the episode on Tuesday, or not necessarily the episode, but just the video on Tuesday, big shout out, big thank you to Clay Turpin and Thomas Williams for coming on the podcast. We had a great time, talked about a lot of really, really good stuff, and it already seems to be getting a very, very positive response. And I've been getting a lot of people asking to come on the podcast after that episode that I really just didn't think would be able to happen. And I'm just so thankful to them for that. I just could not be more grateful to them for coming on the podcast and joining me and just, making it fun. And now, obviously, the podcast is getting a little bit more attention than it otherwise might have. And we're getting guests because of it that, may not have wanted to come on otherwise. So thank you, Clay. Thank you, Thomas. You've really, really helped out the channel more than you can ever know. So thank you so much. And I will definitely have those guys back on here again at some point. And speaking of interviews, like I just said, I've had a lot of people reach out to me wanting to get on the podcast. And so those interviews are going to be coming. And what I'm going to do, I know usually I put out clips, teasers for the episodes, during the week. But instead, I think over the next month, I'm probably going to end up having interviews every week, or at least that's going to be my goal. It might not work out that way, but that's going to be my goal. And so it is possible that what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be uploading interviews on Tuesdays and then podcast full episodes on Fridays with maybe a clip on Thursday for the podcast if I can edit all that and get it out for you guys in time. But definitely the interviews on Tuesday and definitely the podcast on Friday. So I'm going to try and double upload as best I can and double record for you guys because I love it and I know that you guys have had a great time with it. And I just want to get as many people on the podcast as I can. We can have a great time. We can talk about a lot of different cool stuff, baseball-wise, basketball-wise, football-wise, whatever the case may be. So that's going to be coming up for you guys in the next few weeks. But with that, like I said, a lot to get into, so I don't want to waste any more of you guys' time. And we're going to start with the NBA playoffs and where we kind of stand right now in terms of, the teams, the series, where we stand, different players, injuries, lots of stuff going on. So let's start with, I think, the one that has been Maybe one of the least talked about series since it started because it kind of seemed like a formality, at this point, and that is the Miami Heat versus the Philadelphia 76ers. Right now, Miami Heat are up 2-0, and I would be surprised if it is not a sweep at this point. And this is no disrespect to the 76ers. I think that they are one of the best teams in the East, but unfortunately, they have just been ravaged by injury. Joel Embiid, at this point, is playing on one hand, and now apparently a broken face or something along those lines, broken orbital bone, whatever it is. That guy's going out there, and he's an absolute warrior. But there's only so much a human being can take, and there's only so effective a player can be when you have that many injuries and you're in that much pain all the time. But in terms of Joel Embiid, it seems like he's going to try to come back, maybe even for Game 3, which I don't remember exactly when Game 3 is. It's probably in a few days' time, possibly Saturday or Sunday. So just in a couple days, but from what I hear, right now he's listed as out, but his status might be changing over the next couple of days. And man, let me tell you this. In terms of Joel Embiid, we all knew that he was tough. We all knew that he loves basketball and he loves Philadelphia and he loves his teammates, but he's really showing why he is a leader, and I just think that he should be the MVP, and I think he's proving why. He's got the mindset, he's got the statistics, he's got, the team record and all that stuff, and just the turmoil that had happened in Philadelphia this year. It would have been probably easy for him to get very distracted and have his play on the court suffer, but he has not done that. I mean, he has played better this year than I think he's played any other year in his career, and he's had a fantastic career already. He's one of the best centers, if not the best center in the NBA already before this season, and, right now, I think he should win MVP. That's just my opinion. He probably won't win MVP. It'll probably go to Jokic again, and not to say that Jokic is not deserving, because he certainly is, but for me, I would vote Joel Embiid if I had a vote today. But nonetheless, it also shows the difference, right, in Joel Embiid versus Ben Simmons. I think a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, whatever the case may be, I think it was kind of looked at as, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid were 1A and 1B in Philadelphia. They both did different things. They both had different skill sets, but one could not win without the other, and one was not as important as the other. And obviously, over the last 2 years or so, maybe more, that narrative has completely shifted. It is Joel Embiid's team, and that is it. And now, obviously, Ben Simmons not even on the 76ers anymore. And he spent this entire year not playing. Now, obviously, he's having a back procedure in the offseason, so it seems pretty clear to me that he was injured. But I think that at a certain point, Ben Simmons could have played and simply chose not to. Now, we've seen this happen with players before, but I think this time it was much more egregious than any other time I have ever seen this happen. And I think it really just shows the contrast between the type of player that Joel Embiid is and the type of player that Ben Simmons is. And quite frankly, even the type of person that Joel Embiid is versus the type of person that Ben Simmons is. Joel Embiid has multiple injuries that are going to require surgery. Now, maybe the broken orbital bone does not require surgery in this case, but I have seen broken orbital bones require surgery to fix. So perhaps it's not going to require it, but my guess is it will. So you're talking about, a hand surgery that you're going to have for torn ligaments on his shooting hand, by the way, and also a surgery to repair broken bones in his face, possibly even repair, his actual eye and everything like that. So, and he's still out there playing. He didn't play last game, I don't believe, and he might not play in Game 3, but my guess is Joel Embiid is going to be out there at some point. He might not be as effective as he usually is. He might not play well, and he might not even last. He might get injured and leave halfway through the game. Who knows? But he's still out there. He's still out there fighting for his team, fighting for his teammates because his season is on the line, and he knows that his team needs him because he is the leader of that team. He's the leader of that franchise. He's the one on the big money contract. He's the one that, has the entire offense revolve around him. He is the mentor to all of these young guys that are on the team. Your Matisse Thybulles, your Tyrese Maxeys, right? Tobias Harris, great player. Tobias Harris cannot win an NBA championship on his own. Very few humans can win a championship on his own. So Joel Embiid has to be out there for the 76ers to have any chance, especially against a team that is as on fire and as locked in as the Miami Heat are. They are starting to scare me. I mean, they are really, really playing well. And, I don't remember what show it was specifically, but I was watching, a clip of one of the talk shows on ESPN or Fox or something like that in the mornings talking about, the Celtics and the Bucks, which we'll get to them in a second. But, they were talking about that series. The Milwaukee Bucks and Boston Celtics series is now tied 1-1. And the question was raised, does the winner of that series go to the finals? So the winner of Celtics-Bucks, do they go to the finals? And pretty much everybody at the table said yes. Yes, they do. They will go to the winner of this series will go to the finals. And they just kind of dismissed the Miami Heat, which I think is a terrible, terrible idea. It's a terrible, terrible choice to do that because the Miami Heat, first of all, have beaten the Milwaukee Bucks in the playoffs with basically the team that they have right now. Now, obviously, last year they got swept by the Bucks. But at the same time, the Bucks' kryptonite for a couple of years was the Miami Heat. That is what the story was the Miami Heat have the exact perfect roster to beat the Bucks because Bam Adebayo is one of the few people in the world that can stand his ground against Giannis and not lose every single time. And the Bucks' defense, their weakness is giving up three-point shots because they are so big, they are so long, they pack the paint, and you're seeing that in the Celtics series a lot. And so now, the Miami Heat, they are basically just a team that chucks up a bunch of threes. You got guys like Duncan Robinson. You obviously have Tyler Hero, right? Kyle Lowry is a fantastic three-point shooter in his own right. Jimmy Butler, not the best three-point shooter, but he is the heart and soul of that team. For sure, bar none. He definitely is. So, you've got a lot of guys that can hit the three ball at a 40 to 45% clip on that team. I cannot imagine that the Miami Heat are just going to get run over by the Bucks. Now, it might happen, but I just cannot imagine it to where you can just say immediately if the Bucks beat the Celtics, then they're immediately going to the finals. And in terms of the Celtics, just if they win the series running over the Miami Heat, no, certainly not. The Miami Heat really, really played well and beat the Celtics a few times, even during their really hot streak during this season. The Miami Heat are a fantastic team. They're the number one seed in the East for a reason. I just can't dismiss it myself, but I digress. So back to the 76ers and back to the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat right now are walking all over the 76ers. Without Joel Embiid, the 76ers don't have much of a chance. I mean, even with Joel Embiid, it would have been very difficult for them to beat the Heat. And without Joel Embiid, it is, I'm just going to say, it's impossible. You're not going to be able to do it, barring catastrophe for the Heat. Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Kyle Lowry all go out with injury. And even then, apparently, Victor Oladipo is just going to drop 40 on on everybody's head if that happens. So you've just got a lot of great players on the Miami Heat, and I think they're just a little bit too deep. They're a little bit too good for the 76ers, maybe even with Joel Embiid. And at this point, even if Joel Embiid comes back in Game 3, and even if he's really, really effective, I'm not sure I can pick the 76ers to beat this Miami Heat team 4 out of the next 5 games. I just can't imagine it. But anything is possible, right? But at the same time, I just don't see it. So certainly it's looking like the Miami Heat probably are going to waltz their way into the Eastern Conference Finals with relative ease. So yeah, that's looking like what's going to happen next. And, the Miami Heat, they really got lucky. I mean, the number 1 seed was really, really great to have for the Eastern Conference this year because you got to face a injured and, quite frankly, a Bulls team that had given up at a certain point. They just ran, the Heat just ran through them with, pretty relative ease. I think the Bulls did steal 1 game, but whatever. And then, obviously, now they're playing the 76ers, who, quite frankly, they're injured and they don't have enough talent outside of Joel Embiid to do anything, which is crazy considering they still have James Harden. But James Harden has played like he has very little motivation right now. He just doesn't look like the same player that he once was, whether that's age, whether that's injuries, whether it's something in his head, and whether it is lack of motivation, whether it's a combination, whatever it is, it just doesn't look good. It does not look good. And so, at the same time, I'm just not really sure what's going to happen. And by the way, I just realized I said the Bulls. I meant the Hawks. My apologies. The Hawks were the team that the Heat played in the first round. My apologies. Got a little mixed up there. But nonetheless, So, Trae Young had a great series, certainly. But at the same time, Trae Young's not going to beat you by himself if you're the Miami Heat. They ran through the Hawks pretty easily as well. But nonetheless, the point's still the same. The Heat have had a very easy path to the Eastern Conference Final because now they're playing a very injured, very beaten and battered 76ers team, whereas you basically have the Eastern Conference Final matchup that should have happened in the Eastern Conference Final in the Eastern Conference semis now between the Bucks and the Celtics, who are just tearing each other apart, and the Heat are just going to have to sit back and watch as their opponent's going to tear themselves apart in the semifinals. So, the Heat are going to have a real nice, easy path to the Eastern Conference Finals. We'll see if they can go all the way. The second series that I want to talk about right now, it's going to be the Phoenix Suns and the Dallas Mavericks. Phoenix Suns right now also up 2-0 on the Dallas Mavericks. Devin Booker, I believe, has now returned for the Phoenix Suns, so now they are at full strength, at least as far as I know. And, Devin Booker, he's certainly in the MVP conversation. Chris Paul's certainly in the MVP conversation right now. And Luka, obviously, in the MVP conversation, although he's a little bit more on the outside than the other two. But for me, this is going to be another, Phoenix. Phoenix is just going to run through Dallas. Dallas, they've had a great year, and they have a really good defense. And obviously, Luka is, a top 5 player in the NBA. He's just phenomenal, and he's so young and so good. It's just... It makes me sad because I wish I was that good at anything. Literally anything. I would take being that good at turning off lights. I don't care what I'd be that good at. If I'm that good at something, I'd be happy. And, but at the same time, he just does not have that much help around him, to beat this Phoenix team that just is so good at every single level. They have playmakers at every level. Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, obviously Devin Booker. Mikal Bridges put up, a defensive player of the year type season and played well on offense as well. Just a lot of really, really talented guys out there in Phoenix. Just a great team. And, I think that they're another team that's going to have a nice, easy kind of trot into the Western Conference Finals, and we will see what happens with that. Not really a lot to talk about in terms of that series. It hasn't really been much of note. Phoenix Suns have really just been the better team right now, and I think they are the better team. Can Dallas steal a game? Yeah, when you have Luka on your team, there's always a threat that he's going to go off for 45 or 50 points. But I'm pretty sure he also went off for like 45 points in game 1, and they still lost. So even if you go off for 45 if you're Luka, you still aren't guaranteed to win the game. But, I do think Dallas will probably end up stealing a game because they are a good team, and they are a really good defensive team, and they're going back to Dallas. So I can certainly see them stealing a game, but I don't think the series is going to go much farther than that for Dallas. Now on to Golden State and Memphis. This is one heck of a series to watch. I mean, there have been 2 games and 2 ejections in this series. Draymond Green was ejected in the first game, although I will say I feel like his ejection was more based on reputation than it was on the actual play. Yeah, I don't remember who the foul was committed on exactly, but, he did pull him down from midair. But, I think that it was more of probably a flagrant one. It was certainly a flagrant foul, but I don't think it was enough to eject him. But they did, and, Draymond had a lot of fun with it. He skipped around and went to the locker room, and, he's had some fun with the fans. Apparently, he flicked them off. So apparently now we just, NBA players are just allowed to flick off fans. Whatever, sure, I guess. But nonetheless, it's been a crazy series. I'll put it that way. Obviously, a very big injury to Gary Payton II. That's really going to hurt the Warriors because he is that guy that they put on Ja Morant to guard him and to stay in front of him. And the rest of the guards that they have, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Jordan Poole, those guys, they don't have the defensive capability to stand up to Ja Morant one-on-one. Because very few people have that kind of capability, and Gary Payton II was one of them. Shout out to Gary Payton Sr., his father, last player to win the Defensive Player of the Year as a guard before this season, which, of course, Marcus Smart from the Boston Celtics won. But nonetheless, Gary Payton's one of those guys that certainly, he can guard Ja Morant, or at least slow him down a little bit, but the rest of the Warriors team probably cannot. So we will see what happens with that. And if you guys watched my last podcast episode, you will have heard me talk about how Ja Morant is, I don't think he can be the best player on a team that wins a championship. And, I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, look at Ja Morant's going to go off. He's going to carry them to the finals. Listen, what we don't look at when things like that happen is, yes, Ja Morant had 47 points, 8 assists, like 6 or 8 rebounds. He had a phenomenal game. He really did. He really did. He had an absolutely amazing game. But he also had his home crowd behind him, which I know people are like, oh, who cares? No, it really does matter. It really does matter. You can ask any NBA player that plays in front of a crowd that is actually rabid and actually loves the team, and they will tell you that it matters. Having home court matters, especially on the defensive end, when, you gotta be perfect in order to guard these just unbelievable players, unbelievable athletes, and you need that energy boost. You need that adrenaline rush to keep going, especially in the, third and fourth quarters when you're dog tired and you've been, just beating your body up for, an hour and a half, 2 hours at this point, and you need that adrenaline rush. That fan base, that home crowd can really, really help you with that. And anybody who tells you otherwise is just being silly, honestly. They're just lying to you. So he had his home court behind him, certainly, in that game. He had 47 points, but he also took, 35 shots to get there? Which, that's a lot of shots to put up for one player. And he earned it, certainly, but they only won by, I think, 5 points, maybe 6, something like that. And the Warriors played absolutely terrible. I think they went, 6 for 39 from 3. I think that was the statistic. Whatever it was, they shot atrocious from the three-point line. And that's the Warriors we're talking. You're talking Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Jordan Poole. You're talking about all these guys that can just shoot the lights out from 3. And Ja Morant scored almost 50. And you only won by 5. And you were at home. So, to me, phenomenal game by Ja Morant. Amazing that the Grizzlies were able to pull it off. But I cannot sit here and tell you that as this series goes back to Golden State, because Memphis has home court advantage, now the next 2 games are going back to Golden State, and 3 of the next 4 games are going to be in Golden State, I don't think the Memphis Grizzlies have an advantage at this point. Because I can't count on Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Jordan Poole and the rest of the crew to shoot that poorly from 3 again. Especially at home. I just can't see it. And if that's what you need as a team in order to barely squeak out, along with Ja Morant, your best player, having one of the best games of his career, if not the best game of his career, and also you need to be at home to pull it off, and Gary Payton II, who was the guy guarding Ja Morant, was out of that game within 2 minutes. So you didn't even get the defensive prowess of Gary Payton for a quarter and a half, 2 quarters. Because if you do, maybe that game swings different. Maybe Ja Morant misses a couple more shots. You never really know. Now, can the Grizzlies pull this off? Yes, it's possible. Will they? I just don't see it. I just don't see it. And guess what? I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. Because as much as I love the Warriors and the way they play, it is really cool to see the Memphis Grizzlies where they're at right now. Because they just have not had this kind of success maybe ever. Maybe in franchise history. So to see the Memphis Grizzlies in the Eastern Conference Finals would be amazing. I would love to see that. And I would love to see Ja Morant be the best player on a championship team. Although maybe not this year. I'd like the Celtics to win. But nonetheless, I would love to see Ja Morant develop into that. But right now, I just don't think the Memphis Grizzlies have enough. That's my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it all you would like. But I just think that it was a perfect storm for the Warriors to lose that game. How poorly they shot. They were on the road. They lost their best defensive player, arguably. And they just shot so bad. And it's so uncharacteristic for the Warriors, especially Curry and Thompson, to shoot as poorly as he did. Klay Thompson looked awful. Awful in Game 2. Absolutely awful. And the whole of the Warriors did. And they still put up 100 points. I mean, it's just unbelievable to see. But nonetheless, I think that the Warriors are going to end up winning this. I'll say they win it in 6. I think the Grizzlies certainly could win another game, especially if the Warriors shoot as poorly in another game, maybe in Memphis, as they did in Game 2. But we will see how that goes, of course. And then finally, we'll talk about the Milwaukee Bucks and the Boston Celtics. Obviously, the one that hits most home for me. I don't even know where to start, really. I mean, this series is going to age me by 15 years. I mean, this series, I don't even know what to think about it at this point because, the first game, I was sitting there thinking, oh man, we just got blown off our own floor by the defending champs. They're on a roll. You figured that with, and they are the ones that faced the Bulls. You'd figure with the relatively easy first round that the Milwaukee Bucks had, even though the Bulls did steal a game and everybody was, writing off the Milwaukee Bucks, which was just crazy to me. And even without Chris Middleton, the Bucks are just locked in. The Bucks know exactly who they are. They know exactly what they do, and they do it better than anybody else in the NBA. And it is a beautiful thing to watch how they use the personnel that they have to a team. I mean, if you'd have told me that the Milwaukee Bucks were starting 3 centers in the playoffs, I'd be like, oh, they're going to get killed. They're going to get absolutely killed, but they're not. That's the crazy thing is they're not. They are playing so well because they know exactly what they do. They do what they do very, very well. So they blew the Celtics off the floor, off their own floor in Game 1. And the Celtics shot 33% from the field. Like, it just was so bad. It looked like the Celtics had forgotten how to play basketball. And it wasn't, honestly, it wasn't even that they'd forgotten how to play basketball. It was that they tried to play basketball and the Milwaukee Bucks wouldn't let them. Like, that's literally what it looked like. It looked like the Celtics had no clue what to do because this Milwaukee Bucks team was that much better than them. That's what Game 1 looked like to me. They couldn't make threes. They couldn't make twos. They didn't even try twos. They only made 10 two-point baskets. That's 20 points in the whole game. That's unbelievable. The Milwaukee Bucks almost tripled that many points in the paint than the Celtics did. I mean, just unbelievable. Then in Game 2, the Celtics figured it out. Their defense was the one that was smothering. Their defense was the one that the Bucks were having a problem with. The Bucks were the team that couldn't really make threes. The Bucks were the ones that were having a hard time, getting to the paint. Although they, again, I think doubled the points in the paint than the Celtics did at the end of the day, but because that's what they do, right? But nonetheless, for me, I don't know where this series is. I don't know who has an advantage. I certainly think this series is going to go 7 games. I don't see any other way this is going to resolve. The only way that I could see this series not going 7 games, is if the Celtics go back to playing isolation basketball and the Milwaukee Bucks just run them off the floor. Because in the third quarter of Game 2, the Celtics looked like they were about to revert back to their old selves. Just isolation basketball, chucking up a bunch of threes that weren't going in, and they let the Milwaukee Bucks creep back in the game. It was 25 points at halftime, and it was 26 points at one point in the third quarter, and then by, halfway through the fourth quarter, it was like a 14 or 12-point lead. And it's like, oh man, you've let them hang around, and then the Celtics turned it on again in the fourth quarter, and it ended up being, a 23-point win, whatever it ended up being. So, obviously, I think the only way that this series does not go 7 games is if the Milwaukee Bucks keep playing the way they are playing, and the Celtics decide to go back to their old ways. Now, here's what I'll say about the series. I think at this point, based on what I have seen, if I had to give a prediction, and I hate to say this, I really hate to say this, I think the Bucks are going to end up pulling it out. And I will tell you why for all my Celtics fans that are going to give me hate on Twitter or, give me hate in the comment section, whatever it is. I'll tell you why, and please hear me out because you should be worried about this too. What the Milwaukee Bucks are doing right now is completely sustainable, right? They are getting to the paint. They're making layups. They're getting to the free throw line. And, they are defending very, very well. They are playing their game exactly the way they need to play, okay? And what the Celtics did in Game 2 is not even close to sustainable. They shot 65% from three-point range in the first half against the Bucks. Now, you can definitely make the argument, well, a lot of those were so wide open that it's almost impossible to miss them. And I agree. And if you can get a lot of those looks back to back to back to back to back, you certainly could sustain a prolonged run of making a lot of threes. But shooting over 50% from the three-point line as a team for an entire game is almost impossible. And to stretch that out over a 7-game series and think that you can do that for 7 games, that's really, you're asking for it. I mean, is it possible? Yes, it certainly is possible. We've seen teams do it in the past. We've seen the Warriors sustain it. We've seen the Rockets sustain it, although it did come back to bite them in Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. You know, they missed like 22 threes in a row, and it's like the law of averages just dropped a hammer on them. And that's what I'm worried about, is if you rely on three-pointers and making three-pointers in order to beat a team, then you're really asking for it. Whereas the Bucks, you know, what they're doing on offense, as I said earlier, is very sustainable. You know, getting to the line, getting into the paint, you know, posting guys up. And obviously you have who I believe is the best player in the world, Giannis Antetokounmpo, on your team, who at any moment can say, I don't care about defense. I don't care about your defense. I'm going to just destroy you. And he did. I mean, and it's so funny because I was watching Undisputed the other day, right? With, obviously, Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless, right? One of my favorite talk shows to watch, even though there's a lot of really bad takes on there. But there's a lot of really bad takes, quite frankly, on every morning talk show. And, oh man, you know, they talked about, is Giannis still the best player in the world? And Skip Bayless said, no, he's not, because he had 2 horrible games against the Celtics. Now, has Giannis played unbelievably well against the Celtics? No, he hasn't played as well as we've seen him play before in the playoffs as well. I mean, he shot, like 65% in the finals or something like that and averaged like 40 points a night. It was something ridiculous. But he had a 24-point triple-double in the first game and a 29-point triple-double or 28-point triple-double, whatever it was, in the second game. So you really think that he's just not playing well when he's averaging a triple-double in this series? Yeah, he's not shooting super efficiently. Yeah, he's not making baskets super efficiently. And he's regressed back to his old free throw ways, which is he's at about 55, 60% from the line. But he's not playing horrible. Like, to think that he's playing horrible, and also, even if he was playing horrible, to just take that and say he's not the best player in the world anymore after 2 games, it's like, what, are you out of your mind? This is a defense that took a guy who is, no offense to Giannis, way more talented on the offensive end in Kevin Durant, and shut him down for 3 games. Almost completely shut him down until Game 4, when it was desperation time, and Kevin Durant was putting up 35 shots, ended up putting in 30 points or whatever it was. But they shut him down over an entire series. And again, no offense to Giannis, but he's not Kevin Durant on the offensive end. He just isn't. He's a fantastic offensive player in his own right, and he does his own things very, very well. But he's not Kevin Durant, who can hit shots from anywhere, any point, and just keep just piling on your head. Like, he's not that kind of player. He's going to put his head down, he's going to get to the rim, and he's just going to power through you. That's his style. And if he can't do it, he's going to kick out to his open shooters. That's the kind of player that Giannis is. And he is the best in the world at that. That's what he does. So to take that and think that you're not the best player in the world anymore because you had 2 pretty decent games, but just not games where you played completely at your best, it's ridiculous to me. It's absolutely absurd to me. That's at least how I feel about it. But nonetheless, I digress. So I think that this series is going to go 7 games, but I will say the Celtics and the Bucks, this is a coin flip. I mean, honest to goodness, this is an absolute coin flip. Of course I want the Celtics to win, but they're going to have to win in Milwaukee to do it. They're going to have to steal a game, obviously, and it's just going to be crazy. This is going to be a crazy series. This is going to be one of the best Eastern Conference semifinal series that we've ever seen, and I'm really excited about it. Again, it's going to age me 15 years by the end of it. But I think that, you know, I'm nervous. I'll say that, you know, and I know that my Celtics fans are going to be mad at me that I'm saying that I think the Bucks might end up pulling this out. I certainly think the Celtics can pull this out, and I certainly hope that they do, and I could see a world where they do pull it out. If they're able to get some more 2-point baskets, if they're able to keep shutting down Giannis, or at least keep slowing down Giannis. I mean, if they play defense the way they played it the other night, it's going to be hard to beat them no matter how many three-pointers they make. Because, they held the Bucks to 89 points. So, it's tough to say, what happens if the team shoots 40% from three instead of, 60? Well, they still could beat them if they shut down the Milwaukee Bucks. But to me, it's tough because on their home floor, the Bucks are going to have new life, new energy. And I think it's going to be tough. Can the Celtics win this series? Absolutely. Will they win the series? I don't know, man. Again, the Bucks, what they're doing, it's very, very sustainable throughout a 7-game series. And Mike Budenholzer, the way that he's coaching this team, he's basically looking at the Celtics and saying, in order to beat us, you have to make a lot of three-pointers every single night or you are not going to beat us. Because you can't get in the paint because we've got 3 7-footers on the floor at all times. And, we are just going to keep free-throwing you and just laying it up on you to death. That's what we're going to do. All night long, every night, and we're going to play fantastic defense. And we're going to give you the 3-point shots because if you're going to tell me that my options are Giannis driving to the paint every single time versus Grant Williams or Derek White or Peyton Pritchard or Al Horford or any of these guys shooting open threes, I'm going to take Giannis every time. That's what Mike Budenholzer is saying, and I don't blame him. I really don't blame him. So, again, I think the Bucks will probably end up pulling this out, and if they do, hats off to them because they will have had to go through a war. And if the Celtics pull it off, I will be thrilled because I don't think even the Miami Heat are going to give the Celtics as difficult of a time than the Milwaukee Bucks because as good as the Heat are, they are not nearly as potent on the defensive end, at least in the way that the Bucks are. Certainly, the Heat have a lot of great individual defenders. Jimmy Butler, obviously. Bam Adebayo, Kyle Lowry. You've got guys that are great defenders. Even Victor Oladipo is a pretty good defender. So you've got guys that are really, really good on defense. But I just don't think that you're going to have as difficult of a time as you are with Milwaukee, especially getting in the paint because the Heat are a little bit undersized, quite frankly, in the paint. So you're going to have a much easier time getting to the rim against the Heat. But nonetheless, don't want to look too far ahead. Man, what a series this is going to be. I'm so excited that we get to watch it. And I hope the Celtics pull it out. I really, really do. But I am nervous. All right. On to the NFL draft. And, it's been a few days, so I think, I feel a little bit more optimistic about the draft than I did previously. I'm not at all any more optimistic about the Patriots draft than I was a few days ago, and I don't think I will be unless all the guys that we drafted, or at least a bunch of the guys that we drafted, end up turning into Pro Bowlers. But I don't think that it will, and I'm not going to go in depth on the Patriots. I already did a video about that a while ago. I'm not doing it again. I put that out on Sunday, this previous Sunday. I'm not going to talk about it all again because I left all that over there. One thing I did want to mention about it, though, is, Tyquan Thornton, I just don't believe in him. I don't believe in him. When a guy's that fast and, he's projected to be a 4th-round pick, it's because he's not polished. He doesn't have a lot of finesse to his game. He's not very quick. He's just fast. He runs in a straight line quickly. That's it. So, I just really don't like that pick. I really don't. And I didn't really go super in-depth on it in the last video, so I did want to mention that. But other than that, I'm not going to talk about the Patriots. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay away from it. And I just kind of want to talk a little bit about just the draft in general and how it went this year. It was absolutely bonkers. This draft was just crazy to me. And the reason is because, I feel like quarterback gets overvalued a lot in the NFL today. And not for any bad reason or anything. It's certainly for a good reason, because if any position you need to have, of every single position you need to have on your team, and the one that you need to figure out the most, it's quarterback. We've seen over the last few years, specifically, teams that have fantastic players at every position, but if you have a mediocre quarterback, doesn't matter. Look at the Tennessee Titans. Last year, they had Pro Bowlers at pretty much every position, except for maybe like tight end or something. But nonetheless, they had, Derrick Henry. They had Julio Jones. They had A.J. Brown. They had a great offensive line with multiple Pro Bowlers on it. They had a great defensive line with multiple Pro Bowlers on it. They had a secondary that, wasn't all that fantastic, but still a lot of great players. But your quarterback is not great in Ryan Tannehill. And that's what will ultimately hold them back until they realize that Ryan Tannehill is the reason that they're being held back, which I think they might have realized that in this draft. Then they are not going to win a Super Bowl. It's just not going to happen. And there's been plenty of other teams that we've seen this happen to. I mean, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, even look at the Ravens. Lamar Jackson's a fantastic quarterback in his own right, but he struggles throwing the ball sometimes. And now he's going to struggle even more because they lost their best wide receiver. So, it's just crazy to me to kind of look at, to look at these quarterbacks and know that, if you had a better one, you could really go far in this thing, right? And it's sad. And so quarterback gets really overvalued in these drafts. And again, for a good reason, because if you got to have one position, it's quarterback, right? And so, I was worried that this year it was going to be, these quarterbacks that quite frankly were mediocre at best, especially compared to previous classes. And, I picked the Panthers to go with Malik Willis at 6. Malik Willis didn't go until, I think the 3rd round or the 2nd round, whatever it was. Let's see here. Goodness gracious. Yeah. Where did Malik Willis go? I'm completely... Yeah, 3rd round. Yeah, exactly what I thought. So 3rd round, he went to 86 overall. I mean, it's just crazy. This year really showed me that the NFL teams, they do study. They do watch the films. They do see all this stuff. Because, quite frankly to me, these quarterbacks are just not good this year. Now, Kenny Pickett at 20, I was so happy with that. I thought that it was a perfect fit for the Steelers because out of every quarterback in this draft, Kenny Pickett was the one guy I would have been okay with being a first-round pick. And that's exactly how it played out. And so, in that way, I'm so happy with the way this draft went because they realistically valued all these quarterbacks. Now, Carson Strong not getting drafted, that seemed a bit crazy to me. I thought Carson Strong was good enough to get drafted. Even if it was in the 6th or 7th round, I thought he was good enough to get drafted. But for me, I think that they really, really value these quarterbacks exactly where they needed to be. But other than that, what a weird, crazy draft and what a weird, crazy offseason. I have never seen this many stud wide receivers change teams in my lifetime and maybe ever. I mean, this is an unprecedented offseason that I've seen. It's just unbelievable, and we've all gotten to witness it, and it's been great, and it's so cool to see, because next year's going to be so exciting because we're going to get to see all these new guys with new coaching staffs, new quarterbacks, different fits, different schemes. It's just going to be so cool to watch, and this draft was just bonkers. There were so many things that I looked at, and I was like, man, that's a great pick. And so many things that I looked at and said, that's a terrible pick. A lot more of those than the first one, unfortunately. Or maybe not terrible picks, maybe like weird picks. Maybe I was like, with this guy still on the board, I don't know why you went with that guy. But, it's just kind of, it was such a weird draft. And, it kind of played out in a way that I didn't really expect. I mean, there was a run on wide receivers in the first round. And, we kind of figured that might happen. With all the wide receivers that were first round guys going in the top 20 or top 22, whatever it was, I think Treylon Burks was the last one to get drafted in the first round. And yes, he was. Some guys went a little earlier than I expected. Jahan Dotson at 16 was a little bit early for me. I would have preferred him being a 2nd round wide receiver, but obviously the Commanders, they wanted to get their guy. And they thought Jahan Dotson was their guy, and that's certainly I don't mind that. Jahan Dotson's a great player. Obviously you went Garrett Wilson started with Drake London at 8, which he's not the best wide receiver in this class. I'm just gonna say it right now, and I don't think he will be. Guys that are like that, you could turn into Mike Evans, or you could turn into N'Keal Harry. A guy that is a jump ball receiver can certainly develop again into a guy like Mike Evans, who's one of the best wide receivers in football. But if you can't separate and, your route running is not super polished and, you're not able to get away from these quicker wide receiver, or excuse me, these quicker cornerbacks, quicker DBs, if I could speak, then it's not going to work out for you in the NFL. And Drake London is one of those guys that could be a guy that just can't separate. And because that's not his game. He's a jump ball wide receiver. He's a big body, and he goes up against 50-50 balls. We've seen guys like that are successful. We've also seen a lot of guys like that are not. So that scares me for the Falcons. But you started with him at 8, then Garrett Wilson at 10, then Chris Olave at 11, then Jameson Williams at 12. So you had 3 straight wide receivers going, 10, 11, and 12. Jahan Dotson at 16, Treylon Burks at 18, and then that was it for wide receivers. They all went before 20. So, crazy, crazy stuff. I'm sure that the Packers and the Chiefs were ticked at that point because you're probably sitting there thinking, we've got to at least be able to get one of these wide receivers because we need to replace guys that left. And all of them were gone not only before they were able to pick, but, for the Chiefs, 10 plus picks before they were able to pick. I mean, without trading up and giving up a whole lot of draft capital, you were never going to get those guys. So, and in that way, I'm glad that the wide receivers were valued high this year because they were so very good. They were probably the best wide receiver class we've seen in quite a while. Last year was a bit top heavy. Obviously, you had your Jamar Chase, your Devontae Smith, and your Jalen Waddle. But then after that, it kind of drops off, right? It's this year. I think you might produce 7, 8 Pro Bowlers. It's definitely possible, maybe even more for this year's class. So I'm very excited to see how that goes. And right now, what I want to do is I want to kind of talk about 3 of my least favorite picks and then 3 of my favorite picks. Now, I certainly don't think that these were the best picks in the class, or the worst picks in the class. But what I will say is I loved these picks. It might be for their value, it might be for just because I really enjoy the player, or I might have hated this pick because of value or because I just don't like the player. Whatever it is, I want to just kind of talk to you guys and see what you guys think about these picks. And let's see if you agree with me here. So we'll start, we'll do the bad news first. We'll do the bad news first. That way, we'll get the good stuff afterwards. So my 3 least favorite picks in this draft. My first one, the Saints. They drafted Alontae Taylor, a defensive back out of Tennessee, the University of Tennessee, with the 49th pick in the draft. I had a 4th round grade on him, even a late 4th round grade, quite honestly, for me. And one of the reasons why I really did not like this pick was because, I understand that the Saints, they had already drafted Chris Olave in the 1st round. So you got your wide receiver, and, you got Trevor Penning. So you got 2 really, really great picks. So, now what are you going to do with your 2nd round pick? There's a lot of different ways you could go. So, at 49, you got George Pickens available at Georgia. And again, I already know that you picked a wide receiver. But George Pickens, he would have been a 1st round pick had he not gotten injured. That's my opinion. Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati, a guy that's very, very similar, to a George Pickens. You have guys like Cam Taylor-Britt out of Nebraska, safety. He's available at this time if you really, really need to go defensive back. But instead, you went with Alontae Taylor, who again I had a 4th or a 5th round grade on him. I just don't see him, really turning out all that great in the NFL. For me, he's got long arms. He can read routes very, very well, which is great. Maybe he can even move it back to safety at some point, but he's not all that fast. He doesn't have great feet. He's not really great with body control. He gets turned around a lot. Sometimes he gets caught looking in the backfield. He's not a guy that I would have spent a 2nd round pick on. And, even if you did, this is a pick that the Saints did not touch. They didn't trade up. They didn't trade back. I think you certainly, especially considering for the rest of the 2nd round, no defensive backs went. And another defensive back did not go until the 4th pick in the 3rd round. So you're talking about 15 picks later. And it was a guy that I had rated ahead of Alontae Taylor in Martin Emerson. So for me, and by the way, also after that, another defensive back didn't go until the Giants took, Cordell Flott out of LSU. So, you're talking about 2 defensive backs, or two straight corners, right? There were a couple of safeties in there, but, two corners going in, almost an entire round's worth of picks. So I certainly think at the very least you could have traded back and still gotten him and gotten a little more draft capital and a little more value out of that pick. So yeah, certainly I did not like that pick at all, especially with some of the guys that were still available. And I don't think secondary is really that huge of a need for the Saints, especially with Tyrann Mathieu getting signed, which that happened this week, by the way, earlier this week. And I think, unless I'm completely mistaken, I'm pretty sure that they signed Marcus May. Am I losing my mind here? Yeah, so they did sign Marcus May, who's one of the best safeties in the NFL. So, I don't understand why you felt like the need to go with a defensive back in the second round. You don't need it at this point, at least not to me. But nonetheless, it is what it is, and that's what the Saints did. And I think you would have been better served going George Pickens at that spot. Really, really solidify your wide receiver room. Get Jameis Winston a bunch of weapons. If Michael Thomas comes back, that three-headed monster, that's a scary three-headed monster right there. So, I just think that, I think that they would have been better served going with a George Pickens. Or, if you like Sky Moore better, if you like Alec Moore better, then, go with him. Or, excuse me, Alec Pierce. I said Alec Moore, but my apologies. Alec Pierce. If you like those, I like those guys better. If you like Pierce better, then go with Pierce. Whatever. Nonetheless, I just think it was a big reach for the Saints, and I did not like that pick at all. Number 2, Giants picking Wan'Dale Robinson, Kentucky wide receiver. With the 43rd pick in the draft, so a couple of picks before this. And I had a third-round grade on him, and the reason I didn't talk about him first was because, in terms of value of the actual pick and where I had him rated, it wasn't that big of a reach. I think it definitely was a reach. The ESPN had him graded at 80, so, a late third-round pick, or at least a mid-third-round pick at that point. So, for me, it wasn't. I probably had him more in like the low 70 range, high 60 range. I really liked his skill set. I think he could do a lot of things. But here's the problem for me with the Giants. So you had John Mechie out of Alabama still available. Like I said, you had George Pickens available. You had Alec Pierce available. You had Sky Moore available. And I quite frankly think that this wasn't even a great spot for a wide receiver for the Giants. I don't think you necessarily needed to go wide receiver at this point because you had some great wide receivers still available down the board, like Khalil Shakir. That didn't end up going until, the 6th round? Something like that? That was another great pick by not the Seahawks. Goodness gracious, who picked him? I'm completely blanking on who picked Khalil Shakir. But nonetheless, whoever picked him, it was great. Again, I can't really remember who it was. I am going to find it here for you guys because, I don't want to... Khalil Shakir, the Bills, of course, yeah. I remember saying that to at least a couple of my buddies. I'm not sure if I said it on the on my last video about the Patriots draft, but Khalil Shakir, great pick by the Bills. He didn't go into the 5th round, so certainly you could have gotten him, and he's a guy that does a lot of the same things that Wan'Dale Robinson does, and even beyond that, Wan'Dale Robinson is basically Kadarius Toney. I mean, they are very, very similar in terms of skill set. They're very similar in terms of the things that they do on the field. Does that mean you're trading Kadarius Toney? Which I think that's crazy. I know that story came out that, they were fielding calls for Kadarius Toney, but I feel like, you're probably asking for a really high price for Kadarius Toney because he was your first-round pick last year, and yeah, he was hurt, but he didn't play terrible when he was out there. So it was kind of just a strange pick for me, and it was even stranger because, the Giants had a really good first round. I mean, they had a first round that, quite frankly, I don't think you could have done much better. I mean, you got Kayvon Thibodeau, who to me is the best player in this class, and he always will be the best player in this class because he just, his attitude problems, the reason he's whatever, man. Like, he's a fantastic player. And so you got him at 5, and then you got Evan Neal at 7. I didn't even think Evan Neal was going to be around at 5, never mind 7. You had a fantastic first round, and then you go and pick a clunker with your second round pick. It was so weird to me. I did not like that pick at all, and I know that Giants fans, as a whole did not like that pick at all, so I know I have their support on that. But nonetheless, Yeah, I just, pretty crazy to me that they ended up going with Wan'Dale Robinson there, especially with all the other great wide receivers that were available. If you were going to pick a wide receiver, you should have certainly gone George Pickens, at least in my opinion. Okay. Speaking of wide receiver, number 3 of my least favorite picks in this draft, Romeo Doubs, wide receiver out of Nevada. Not really a lot of knowledge on this guy, but I didn't even really had a grade on him, but if I had to have graded him before the draft, I probably would have said a 6th round guy. Again, just because I don't really know a lot about him, so, that's on me. That's just ignorance right there. So, maybe he's probably more of a 5th round guy, maybe a 4th round guy, whatever the case is. He went with the 132nd pick in the draft, so in terms of value itself, it's not the worst pick in the world. I think you did reach a little bit, quite frankly, but for me, I think that because the Packers already picked a wide receiver earlier in the draft at that point, I just don't understand why you felt the need to have to go with another wide receiver at that spot. And even if you did have to go with another wide receiver at that spot, you definitely should have gone with Calvin Austin out of Memphis. I mean, way better of a player. I mean, just to compare here, Romeo Doubs was ranked 157th and the 22nd best wide receiver in the class by the ESPN analysis. And Calvin Austin, who went 7 or 6 picks later, was the 13th best wide receiver in the class and ranked 76th overall. So you're talking about a guy who's supposed to be an early 3rd round pick that the Steelers got in the 4th round, and you picked a guy who, quite frankly, I think should have been a 6th round pick in the 4th round before that guy. So, Romeo Doubs, again, he's a guy that has a good amount of potential. He's a guy that shows some good foot speed, has great hands, but he just isn't very polished, and I think he's more of a project guy. And if you're going to go with a wide receiver in the 4th round, yeah, I guess you could take a project guy, but you don't have time for that if you're the Packers. You don't have time for a guy to, not have it figured out day one. You've got to replace guys in your wide receiver room. You've got to have guys that are going to step in and be number 1 or number 2 targets right away. And I don't think that's Romeo Doubs. Calvin Austin certainly is that guy for you if you were the Packers, but obviously that's not the case. And the Steelers, they get another great wide receiver. I mean, the Steelers I'm jealous. I mean, as a Patriots fan, I wish that we had even half the ability to draft wide receivers than the Steelers do, because it just seems like they hit on every single one of them. It's crazy. All their wide receivers, it feels like, no matter where they draft them, 1st round, 2nd round, 5th round, doesn't matter, 6th round, 7th round, who cares? They're going to turn into studs. I just feel like that's just always how it works for the Steelers. So a great pick for them, and we'll see how that goes. But again, back to Romeo Doubs, back to the Packers. I think it was a big reach for them. Not the biggest reach in this draft by any means. Certainly, there's certainly plenty of other reaches like Cole Strange and Tyquan Thornton. But I just think that you had better players available at that point to draft. And especially, I mentioned Khalil Shakir. He was also on the board at this time. So you had 2 guys that certainly could have been guys that were better. And even, I think that you could probably upgrade a little bit at tight end. And Chig Okonkwo, one of my favorite players in the draft out of Maryland, at tight end, he was still available, and he went at the very, very last pick in this round to the Tennessee Titans. So good on the Titans. I think he's really going to do well for you guys out there in Tennessee. But, man, I don't know. None of those were my favorite picks in the world, obviously, and I don't think that they were going to be good picks. I don't think they got the value that they were looking for there. And now on to 3 of my favorite picks in this draft. And again, I said this at the beginning, but these are not the best picks in the draft by any means, I would say. They're some of my favorite picks. I'm trying to stay away from like the obvious, right? Like Cole Strange out of Chattanooga in the 1st round. Obviously, that's not my favorite pick in the world, right? And so, and Tyquan Thornton, right? I've already discussed these. I'm trying to stay away from the obvious stuff. Derek Stingley at 3, I think, was a big reach. I think he certainly has the capability of being the best defensive back in this class, but he showed some attitude problems, some effort issues, and going to Houston where they're not very good, I don't know. Like, that's probably a big, big, big gamble that you're taking. But, I'm trying to stay away from the obvious stuff, right? Like the big, Drake Londons and the Derek Stingleys, like I said. Tyler Smith out of Tulsa going in the first round. He was discussed of going in the first round, maybe, but I don't think he should have. And, I think that, ESPN, I guess, agrees with me. They have him as the first pick in the second round in terms of a grade. I think that his value is probably mid-second round to me. But, I'm trying to stay away from the obvious stuff like that. So that's what I'm doing here. I wanted to mention that, but... so these are some guys that were picked a little bit later in the draft, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever rounds, that I just think were great value. That's kind of more where I'm going with this because, again, I could talk about Tyler Smith a whole bunch. I could talk about Cole Strange a whole bunch. I could talk about Jalen Petrie, another Texans pick that I thought was a big reach. Jalen Petrie was the fifth pick in the second round, and quite frankly, I had a third-round grade on him. Maybe late second round. So I thought that was a bit of a reach. And I also just don't understand why they went safety at that point. So, strange. But nonetheless, these are just picks that I think are really good value, and I'm trying to stay away from the obvious guys. So, a guy who's first favorite pick for me, one of my favorite picks in the entire draft, might even be my number one favorite pick in the entire draft, quite frankly. And I talked about it in my interview with Clay and Thomas a little bit, and I've already mentioned him in this video as well, but Cam Taylor-Britt, safety out of Nebraska, he went in the second round here. He went at number 60, and obviously he was drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals, and, a lot of people don't like this pick, and the reason is because they went Dax Hill out of Michigan. With their first round pick, who basically Cam Taylor-Britt and Dax Hill are very similar. I mean, guys that are primary safeties, but they can play in the box. They can play free safety, they can play strong safety, they can play slot corner, they can play nickel corner, they can do all this stuff. And so they're very similar players. So you kind of can sit there and I understand the point of like, well, why would you pick two of the very same players? Because they're both very, very good. And honestly, for the Bengals, your secondary is what you need to work on the most. And so doubling up on two guys that are so versatile, especially with what we talked about in our last interview with, I can't believe I'm completely and utterly just blanking on the safety out of Cincinnati. But nonetheless, he was franchise tagged, and, he's probably going to leave at the end of the year. So, you're probably not going to re-sign him. And it's driving me nuts, guys. This is just what happens when you have a lot of stuff, to think about for these videos. You just completely blank on who the heck is supposed to be these players. It's Jesse Bates. My goodness, Jesse Bates. Jesse Bates is probably going to end up leaving if you're the Bengals. So. I certainly think that you're going to need to replace him, so one of these guys can replace him, and then you definitely need to get somebody who can play slot corner, who can keep up with these wide receivers that are in your division. Yeah, I think they were both really great picks, and obviously Cam Taylor-Britt is a, his value at that point probably was around there, so it wasn't like they got, a guy that was supposed to go in the first round and got him all the way in the late second round. It's not anything like that, but... For me, the value comes in the kind of player that he is. And I think that he's going to be a really good fit in Cincinnati. And I, quite frankly, would not be surprised if he's a starter day one. That's how much I believe in Cam Taylor-Britt. Number 2, Chad Muma, linebacker out of Wyoming. He was picked in the third round with the 70th pick, and he was picked by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the Jaguars, they didn't have the best draft, at least not to me. They had a decent draft. But I don't think that Trayvon Walker is the best player in the draft. I don't think he should have been number 1 overall pick. But obviously they would much rather have a guy with, a high ceiling and a low floor than, somebody like a Kayvon Thibodeau or an Aiden Hutchinson who's probably a little bit more of a sure thing. And they obviously didn't feel like Ike Ekwonu or Evan Neal was the way to go. They didn't feel like offensive line was the way to go. So they went with Trayvon Walker. And for me, they traded their second round pick, obviously, to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so they didn't take anybody in the second round, and they got a center who it was a big reach. Luke Fortner out of Kentucky. Again, I'm so sorry to all my Kentucky people out there. I'm just having a hard time with all of your players, but quite frankly, these are reaches. I'm sorry, they just are. You didn't go offensive line early when you could have, and then you went and really reached on an interior offensive lineman in the third round. But then you took Chad Muma out of Wyoming. Wonderful pick. I mean, again, in terms of value, I had him as a mid-second round guy. I had him higher rated than a lot of other people did. ESPN has him rated about right where he went. So in terms of value, maybe he didn't get a big steal. But for me, Chad Muma, I would have loved for the Patriots to draft him in the second round. I thought that he's a great fit. He's a good leader. He plays very fast. He's a big, rangy guy. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's 6'3", 240. So his size doesn't really stand out to you. But, he's really, really good in zone coverage. He plays the run well. He can run sideline to sideline. And he's just a guy that, man, I just think that he's going to be a really great fit in the NFL. Reminds me a lot of Luke Kuechly. He really does. And I thought that Jacksonville got an absolute steal in this third round. And again, in terms of pure value, this is about where he was rated. So, they didn't get a pure steal in terms of Chad Muma was a first-round guy and they got him in the third round. And again, I said this earlier, but I'm staying away from the obvious. Obviously, I could easily say Nakobe Dean at 83 or Malik Willis at 86 to the Titans. Guys that could have gone in the first round. Or, maybe even a guy like, a Travis Jones. Travis Jones, that's a great pick by the Ravens. The Ravens had a fantastic draft, by the way, even though they did trade Hollywood Brown. So that, makes me lose, makes me take away some points. But, nonetheless, they had a really, really good round, or a really good draft, excuse me. And, it's crazy, how well the Ravens did. So you can easily talk about any of their picks being great picks. But for me, I want to focus on a little bit less obvious. Chad Muma out of Wyoming. That very well, again, I said this about Cam Taylor-Britt, but might be my favorite pick in the entire draft. Chad Muma to the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll see if it works out, though. But, yeah. And then my third favorite pick for this draft, Daniel Faalele, tackle out of Minnesota. He went to the Baltimore Ravens, so, this is one of the Ravens' picks. And he went in the fifth round at 110, and what a draft for the Ravens. As I mentioned earlier, they had an absolutely fantastic draft, and for me, I said fifth round. Fourth round, he went in the fourth round. My apologies. And, I had him as an early third round guy. And obviously, he goes in the early fourth round. So you got him a whole round behind where I thought that he could have. And he is just a mammoth of a man. 6'8", 385 pounds. A giant. You're talking about Trent Brown-sized mammoth of a man. So, if he can't protect Lamar Jackson, I don't know who can. And, the only thing that scares me about Daniel Faalele is obviously he's such a big guy. He is a guy that's probably not going to be able to move around a lot and not going to be able to get upfield a lot in run schemes and everything, although certainly could develop into that. And Lamar Jackson is one of those guys that runs a lot. He's a guy that moves around in the pocket a lot. He's a guy that, keeps things fresh and he decides to run. And, can Daniel Faalele adapt to that kind of a quarterback? Can Daniel Faalele be a guy that can adjust on the fly and instead of blocking from the right to the left, block from the left to the right because Lamar Jackson has cut upfield or reversed fields? Can he, decide that when his quarterback is scrambling? Can he get upfield and help block the linebackers and safeties and DBs? Can he do that? I don't know. But nonetheless, it was a fantastic value pick for the Ravens. They needed to get some just big bodies on that offensive line, and they did that with Daniel Faalele. And I mean literally, again, 6'8", 385, a monster. I said this, off podcast, obviously. I was really hoping that Daniel Faalele would fall to the Patriots at 121, and he went, obviously, just before that at 110. But for me, again, fantastic pick by the Ravens. And to me, I think the Ravens may have very well had my favorite draft or my favorite class in this entire draft. I mean, let's take a look at the Ravens draft. Where in the world are the Ravens? Am I out of my mind here? There they are. Okay, so you got Kyle Hamilton at 14. I mean, he was a consensus top 10 pick in the draft. You got Tyler Linderbaum at 25. David Ojabo, in the second round. Travis Jones, Daniel Falele, Jalen Armour-Davis. And then, I don't know much about Charlie Kolar. I think that, he's a big boy, 6'7", 250. Certainly can catch the ball out of that position and block a little bit as well. So, not so sure about him. I don't know a ton about him. And then he went tight end again. Isaiah Likely, that's another really, really good pick for them. Certainly. I actually would probably say that that's a better pick than Charlie Kolar, and you got them both in the 4th round. So I think that was a really, really nice job to double up. If you're not super sure about Charlie Kolar, you double up with Isaiah Likely. He's one of the best tight ends in the entire draft. And after that, it kind of slows down, right? Obviously, Demarion Williams might have been a bit of a reach out of Houston. And then Tyler Beatty, again, a running back in the 6th round. Maybe you're just taking guys that, might be a scheme fit. He's a small, quick, tough guy. So, maybe a bit of a reach, but, at that point, it is what it is. But look at these top 5, 6 picks. Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum, David Ojabo, Travis Jones, Daniel Falele, and Jalen Armour-Davis. Guys that are just going to, these all could be starters day one for you. I mean, you needed guys up front to really help you out. And David Ojabo, he's injured. Would have been a top 10 pick probably had he not gotten injured in his pro day. So to get him in the 2nd round, if you're the Ravens, I mean, in a year, that guy might be the best pass rusher in the league. I mean, he's that talented and he's that ferocious. And Travis Jones, a guy that, certainly the best interior rusher in the entire class. I had him early 2nd round. Maybe I could have even seen him going in the 1st round if somebody really, really liked him late. Like, I could have seen him going to the Cowboys. I really could have seen him going to the Cowboys. Could have seen him going to the Bengals. I think the Bengals could have used a guy like Travis Jones. But, for me, to get him in the 3rd round, what a pick for them. Another fantastic pick for the Ravens. And it just was a fantastic class. And some other classes that I really, really liked. Again, if you haven't figured it out, I am going to do a couple of classes that I really, really liked and a couple of classes that I really, really did not like. Another class that I really, really liked was obviously, as I talked about them earlier, the New York Giants had a really, really good class. Especially, Kayvon Thibodeau, Evan Neal, your 1st round was absolutely fantastic. Although I will say after that, it does kind of drop off. But, for a first-time GM, you're sitting there thinking, we just need a good draft. We need a good, amount of draft picks, and we need you to hit on those draft picks, especially early on. Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal, you hit home runs with both of them. And quite frankly, to me, it didn't really matter much of what you did afterwards. You probably were going to have a really good draft. Now, I will say, a lot of these picks are big reaches late in the draft. But getting Darian Beavers out of Cincinnati, I think was a great value in the 6th round. But to me, it doesn't make up for the fact that look at these names. You got Joshua Azudu, who, not as much of a reach as the other guys, but he's a pretty decent reach. Cordell Flott, another guy that was, a bit of a reach, but I could certainly see him going at this spot. I didn't have him particularly going in the 3rd round. I feel like he was more of a 4th round guy to me, but ESPN actually has him rated at 85. So they certainly have him rated a little bit higher than I would have. Daniel Bellinger, I think that there were other better tight ends available at that point in the 4th round. Dane Belton, another guy that was a big reach. Micah McFadden, another guy that was a big reach. DJ Davidson, another guy. I didn't even have DJ Davidson as I didn't even think he'd get drafted, quite frankly, and he went in the 5th round. Marcus McKethan, certainly, is it McKethan or McGeethan? I've heard both. I'm pretty sure it's McGeethan now that I kind of mention it, but, nonetheless, again, another guy that I did not have, getting drafted, and he went in the 5th round. So, I think that it was a good class, and I think that you had some good picks. Cordell Flott, Kayvon Thibodeau, Evan Neal, Darian Beavers. You got some really good picks, but then I think, it was, not the best class in the world. But still a pretty good class, especially for the Giants, considering all the heartbreak that they've had in the draft over the last few years. And then what might be my favorite class, and it really hurts me to say this, the New York Jets. They had a phenomenal class. And I mean, they got rid of a lot of draft capital to move up and down in this class. But you got Sauce Gardner, you got your number one DB in this, in the entire class. You got the number one DB, even though Derek Stingley went at 3. I still think Sauce Gardner is probably the best DB in the draft. You got Garrett Wilson. You got your number 1 wide receiver at number 10. And then you saw a guy that you really, really liked on your board falling and slipping. And Jermaine Johnson, you trade up and you go get him. So you've got 3 guys that I think were top 15 picks in the draft. And you got them all in the first round. Fantastic. And then Breece Hall is a guy that can be your bell cow at running back. And you got him in the second round. I think this is about where he deserves to go early in the second round. So it wasn't a reach at running back, certainly, for the Jets, especially, a team that needs a good running back right now. You've got, Max Mitchell out of Louisiana, who I really, really liked. ESPN does not have him graded very well, and I think that's because he's not the best pass protector in the world, but I think that he could certainly be a swing tackle in the run game and really, really help you out in the run game there. I think that he could really do a lot of really good things for you on your team. And there was a tackle that played for the Patriots not too long ago. I think he was just there last year. Cam something, and I'm just completely blanking that he was our swing tackle, and he could be like a Marcus Cannon. Let's use an even better example. LaMarcus Cannon. He's a guy that, he could fill in and start every once in a while, but he wasn't the best. But, man, as a swing tackle, he was your guy. So I think Max Mitchell can be that. So to get him in the 4th round, I think was really good. I saw Jeremy Ruckert play a lot because I am an Ohio State fan. And, he's just a guy. I think he was, one of the biggest big play threats in all of college football. Never mind just on Ohio State, because Ohio State had a really potent offense this year. Obviously, you got your Chris Olave, you got your Garrett Wilson, you got your Jackson Smith and Jigba, you've got your Jeremy Ruckert. So, you've got all these offensive weapons, and I think Jeremy Ruckert was the most underrated of all those guys, certainly. And so I thought that was a great pick for them in the 3rd round. And obviously, we already talked about Breece Hall. And then Michael Clemens out of Texas A&M. Probably a bit of a reach, but, that's your last pick of your draft. You get a guy that, you think you'd like. Obviously, you don't have the ability to take him later, and if you really, really like that guy out of Texas A&M, then great, go and get him. So for me, man, this was probably my favorite class in the entire draft, and good for the Jets. I mean, and this is, again, another thing that makes me so frustrated about the Patriots draft, and again, I know I said I wouldn't talk about it, but I got to talk about it a little bit, is the Jets had a fantastic draft. The Dolphins had an incredible offseason where they got way, way better and spent a lot of money, and they are ready to go. They are ready to go all in right now. And obviously the Bills, you got Von Miller, and, you had a pretty decent class as well if you are the Buffalo Bills. So, let's take a look at the Buffalo Bills, I guess, while we're here. So you got Kaiir Elam at 23. Maybe a bit of a reach. And James Cook, another guy, maybe a bit of a reach, but, you needed a running back. So I completely understand. And if that's the guy that you want, that's your guy. And then Khalil Shakir in the 5th round. I mean, man, that was just such a big, big steal. And, to get, it was weird because the Bills, all the websites said that the Bills needed a wide receiver. And I didn't really understand that. But if you're going to pick a guy, if you're going to pick a wide receiver, picking Khalil Shakir in the 5th round, if that's the one wide receiver you're going to take, that is fantastic value. And he could step in and be a starter in the slot day 1 for the Bills. And you got him in the 5th round. So, I think that was really, really a good pick. And, they got Christian Benford in the 6th round out of Villanova. Never really heard of him. Didn't have him getting drafted. Sorry, I don't really watch Villanova football all that often. But, nonetheless, I think that he was an interesting pick. And then, Balin Spector, not the best pick, but I think that, you could develop a guy like that. He's quick, he's fast. That's pretty much all you got out of him. He's not very polished. But, I think that, the Bills had a good draft. The Dolphins didn't have the best draft in the world, but, they certainly, had had a really big offseason. The Dolphins only had 4 picks. And, You had a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, and 2 7ths. So, didn't really have a lot of picks, so it's not like their draft was incredible. But their offseason, they got a lot better. The New England Patriots haven't really done anything to get a lot better. They haven't done anything to get better. And that's what frustrates me more than anything is, you see your entire division getting way better, and you just sit by and do nothing. So that's what frustrates me more than anything. But, man, what a draft. I mean, absolutely crazy draft. And, another team, I do want to mention this before I get out. Another team that was one of my favorite drafts in the entire, or one of my favorite draft classes in this entire thing was the Chiefs. Trent McDuffie at 21, George Karlaftis at 30, Sky Moore at, in the 2nd round, and then Leo Chenal out of Wisconsin. I had him rated way higher than the 3rd round. I had him as a 2nd-round guy. So, to get him in the, in the 3rd round, phenomenal. Darian Kennard out of Kentucky, I really like him in the 5th round. I think that's great value. I think he's one of the best guards in this class. And you know what? There you go. There's your Kentucky guy that I really, really like. So you're welcome there. Isaiah Pacheco out of Rutgers, not that great. And then Nazeeh Johnson out of Marshall, another guy that I really didn't have very high. And then you got, your Brian Cook and your Joshua Williams. And, these are guys that, were probably reaches at that point. But, still, you got a lot of great players if you're the Chiefs. I think they had a fantastic class. And they addressed every need that they had. They needed some guys on the defensive line. They got that. They needed some new wide receivers. And, they got Sky Moore, obviously, to replace Tyreek Hill. You needed DBs. You probably needed another running back. You needed the linebacker, and you addressed every single one of them, and you addressed every single one of them at a high level. So good on you for the Chiefs. But nonetheless, I do want to move on to baseball. So baseball is still going on right now, obviously, and there's not a lot to talk about. I just kind of want to talk about the Red Sox a little bit, and this is going to be tough for me because the Red Sox stink right now. They have a better record than only 6 teams right now. And obviously one of them is the poor Cincinnati Reds, who are 3-22. But, the Red Sox have, again, a better record than only 6 teams, and they are within 1.5 games of 5 of them. So, they are just not performing well. Their pitching has really let them down, but their offense has really let them down, too. They're just not playing well at all. Their bullpen has been absolutely atrocious. They blew another big lead to the Angels the other day, and they just got crushed today, 8-0. Obviously Shohei Ohtani pitched, so, there's only so much you can do there, but, they still got crushed. And their pitching is just not good. And, if you had told me that Michael Wacha would be our best pitcher, 25 games into the season or 30 games into the season, I would have told you we're doomed, because Michael Wacha, he's pitched great so far this year, and hats off to him, but there is no reason why Michael Wacha should be your best pitcher. No reason at all. So, certainly just been really, really upsetting to see the Red Sox perform so poorly. And I don't really know what they're going to do. The Yankees are absolutely tearing the cover off the ball. They've won a million straight games, although I think they did lose yesterday. But, they look great. Their pitching looks great. Their bullpen looks great. Their offense looks great. The Blue Jays are obviously the Blue Jays. They have a fantastic team. The Rays are going to be the Rays. They're not going to have the best players in the world, but they're always going to be in the conversation for the division. And, you are almost as bad as the Orioles right now if you are the Red Sox. And quite frankly, I might take the Orioles right now. You lost 2 or 3 to the Orioles the other week. So, and you got crushed in a couple of games as well. So, what do you do if you're the Red Sox? I have no idea what in the world is going on. And you know what? I'm all right with it, because right now the Red Sox need a reset. And last year was an anomaly. Last year, I could not believe that the Red Sox were as good as they were. And this year, they're playing about as well as I figured they'd play last year. And, when Chris Sale comes back, it'll certainly be a boost for their pitching staff. But at this point, he is so unreliable in terms of staying healthy that I'm not really sure what you're going to get when he comes back. He's been injured for most of the last 3 years. So, what do you do? I mean, even their World Series run, he was coming out of the bullpen because he had been injured for a lot of the season, and he wasn't stretched out. And, last year he missed a lot of time, and this year he's missing some time with broken ribs, and, it's just been such a bummer to see Chris Sale, who's one of the most talented and most awe-inspiring to watch pitchers in the league, just be relegated to the bench over and over again because the guy's body can't hold up right now. And it's really upsetting because, he's great. So, that'll be a boost, but, how much can you rely on him to be the workhorse of this team? Nate Eovaldi can only do so much for Nate Eovaldi, and he's struggled so far this year. And then the rest of your pitching staff is Tanner Houck, who has now been relegated to the bullpen because he's pitching so poorly. Michael Wacha, who's pitched great so far this year, and that's been fun to watch. But at the same time, you can't count on him to keep that up. He might be able to keep it up, but I doubt it. And then Rich Hill is your fifth starter, who the Red Sox have made it very clear. They don't want him pitching more than 5 innings because of his age and because of his injury history. So now you're relying heavily on a bullpen that stinks right now. Garrett Whitlock is phenomenal. After that, you don't really have much that I can rely on. Matt Barnes has regressed. Jake Diekman has blown several big leads, right? So, you've got guys that just, Matt Strahm hasn't really done much of note. Josh Taylor hasn't done much of note. So it's just kind of strange to see. It's really strange to see. And then, I don't remember the guy's name, but the Japanese pitcher in the bullpen for the Red Sox cost them a game. I mean, he chucked the ball about 1,000,000 feet over the first baseman's head and lost the game in extra innings for him. So, it's sad, man. Like, sad to watch the Red Sox fall this hard off a cliff. But quite frankly, I saw it coming. I didn't expect it to be this bad, but I didn't expect them to make the playoffs this year. I didn't even expect them to be 500 this year, quite frankly, especially in the division that we're in. We just don't have that kind of talent. And Trevor Story struggled to open the year offensively. Xander Bogaerts has played well. Verdugo's played well. JD Martinez has played well. But outside of that, Jackie Bradley's hitting 160 because that's what he does. Bobby Dalbec hasn't really played much. And when he has played, he hasn't been that great. It's just been really tough. And now you got Frenchie Cordero playing first base. And it's just like, oh, man, like, this stinks. So, it's been rough for the Red Sox so far this year. And maybe they'll figure it out. They might turn it around a little bit. But, for me, I think the Red Sox needed a reset. They need to start saving some money. They need to start getting rid of some of these big contracts. It's going to be interesting to see where Shane Bloom brings this franchise and builds them up through their farm system over the next few years. But, yeah, just sad. Just sad to see. But that's going to be it for me, guys. A lot of stuff that we dove into today. It was a little all over the place today. I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of stuff to digest for the draft. So forgive me for not having it all off the top of my head. But, sometimes you just kind of need some refreshers to remember where your talking points are. But nonetheless, thank you guys so much for watching. And again, thank you guys so much for 20 subscribers. Let's get to 100 by the end of the year. We certainly can do it, but I need you guys in order to do that. But again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Hey guys, me again. I just want to say thank you so much for checking out the Lopes Goes Last podcast. It means the world to me that you decided to stick all the way to the end. That's super cool. So thank you again. And if you really, really like what you see, I'd love for you to subscribe, like the video, and share it with all your family and friends because, this is my passion project. This is what I love to do, and I really want the sucker to grow. And the only way that can happen is through you guys, is if you guys can help me out. So again, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, like the video, share with all your friends and family. That's the only way this is going to grow. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.